the teller of the tales here. Um, my name is Howard Luck, last name Luck. Um, my mother's maiden name I thought was very unusual. Her maiden name was Dice, D-I-C-E, and I thought Dice marries Luck, and boy, we ought to. Later years, I thought, gee, we should be gamblers or something, but nothing ever like that ever happened. So it was just, I'm sure glad they tied up together though, because I've enjoyed life, and I want to tell some. Every time I say I'm going to tell some stories, it makes me think how the kids used to. They're telling stories. It was things that wasn't true. These happenings to me in World War II, I had related some of them to friends, and I was asked to tell them on tape so that others might hear it, and so I hope it don't drive you crazy, but I'll do the best I can. I am 84 years old and being taken care of by the VA, the Veterans Administration, and I'm classified as blind, and these things I tell about, I could see then. I saw this. So I'm not telling stories, I'm just relating happenings. The war started, of course, 1941. I was 16 years old. I was in high school. We lived in South Florida. Dad, with us, the family moved to Memphis, Tennessee, because he had a job with a plant making Mitchell B-25 bombers. The year now is 42, and 1942. And I'm in high school, and my sister has married a sailor, a very nice young man, and with his help, I decided I wanted to go into the Navy. Well, the first barrier was that I wasn't old enough, so we added a year to my age. And then when I went to join in Memphis, with his help, knowing the guy behind the desk, he says he's too light, I can't take him. So Bill took me out to the market, and I ate bananas, drank water and ate bananas. Oh my God, did I eat bananas. Anyhow, Bill says, I think that's enough, let's go back. So we went back, he weighed me again. He said, hey, that's close. He said, I think I can fake that. It'll just look like he went to the bathroom after I weighed him. So he weighed me and I signed the papers, and he said, you're in the Navy. And I thought, okay. So he said, you'll be notified in a couple days to be at the train station, have your belongings with you, and off you go. And as he said, it did happen. I think 2 days went by, the phone rang, I was down the following morning at 6 a.m. at the train station, and I got on a passenger car that I don't think you would believe how old it was. And I jokingly did sneak a little lie in here and there, because I said to friends later, I found some paper under one of the seats of the passenger car, and I was reading it, and I swear to God it was a part of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Of course, I'm just lying, but that was an old train. Anyhow, we headed west, went across the southern United States, stopped at every little valley there in Arizona and Colorado and everything, and wound up in San Diego, got off the train onto a bus. Bus took us to San Diego boot camp entrance gate, and as we passed through, I remember one of the sailors standing there hollered something that I remember all my life. And as we passed through, warm and the windows were open, he says, you'll be sorry. Well, I don't think I ever was, but I did use that term sometime later when I had an opportunity. And we were in San Diego boot camp. Here, re-examined and given shots and asked more questions than you could believe. And I was just grilled on everything. And after 2 or 3 days, he said, you're going to have to learn to type. And I said, why would I want to learn to type? And he said, because you're a radioman. And I said, I'm a what? He says, you're a radioman. And I said, what in the world tells you I'm a radioman? He said, from everything we did, you gave the right answers to be a radioman. He said, you even was able to copy that code that we sent. And I said, oh boy. And so off it started. I learned to type. I learned code. They made me copy code from the radio, and this went on for weeks. They did to teach me to type. They sent me down next to a young fella. Oh my God, he must have typed 80 words a minute. That was pretty discouraging. Anyhow, I learned to type, and we went along, and then they went over and turned us into took us over to another building. Then they taught us semaphore, blinker, radio codes, flags, you name it, just a little bit of everything. And one morning the chief came in and he said, Luck? I said, yes, sir. He said, you're in the armed guard. I said, I'm in the what? Armed guard? I thought, oh my God, I'm a guard at a bank or something. What the devil does armed guard mean? He said, now you'll find out. Be prepared to board this bus, and they'll take you to another place in L.A. for some more training. So from San Diego boot camp, I went to L.A. and in L.A. We got some more training, specialized. And from L.A. we went to San Francisco, and San Francisco, they took us over to Treasure Island, the island in the middle of the bay with Oakland on one side and San Francisco on the other, and unloaded us from the bus, and it was about noon, and they said, we march straight ahead, we're going to have chow. It's time for lunch. So as we marched along, I was looking at the statues along the path, along the paved driveway, and they were statues of nude women. A lot of them beautiful. And I thought, wowee, I'm going to like this. What the devil is this? Well, it turns out that this training camp was based at a location at Treasure Island. It had a World's Fair just a few years before, and the statues remain. So that was my home base. And I got a little more training, and then a few more weeks went by, and they grabbed me up, said, get on that bus, you're going down to the dock and get on your ship. And I got off the boat and looked at the ship, and I thought, oh my God, what am I in? Here was a Liberty boat, that's a cargo ship. And I said to him, there was a chief putting us on there now. I said, what is this? He said, these are armed cargo ships taking the supplies to the troops on the islands, and you have to protect them with guns and radio, and that's your job, and you'll find out when you get on there. So I did very shortly. I was a radio signalman. I had a radio shack. It was up to me to communicate with the rest of the world, and I was sitting in the radio shack. I'd only been on there about an hour, and they're loading other things on, and the captain walked in and introduced himself. I'm the captain, you're the radio man? I said, yes, sir. They said, I want you to fix that thing. I said, fix it? He said, yes. I want to hear music on my ship. I want you to get the good local musical station, and I want it piped into every quarter of this ship. Do you understand? Yes, sir. And I thought, oh my God. Well, so I didn't know what was wrong with it. So the only thing I could do, I went into a room, compartment next to the radio shack, and here was about an 8x8 room with shelves loaded with every piece of radio equipment you have ever seen. So I opened up this set that he wanted to get the radio from. I looked at it, and if it had 2 tubes, I took 2 tubes out of the shelves off the next compartment and replaced them. I replaced every piece of equipment, having it turned on the whole time. And every time I replaced a piece, I'd think, geez, I sure wish it would come on. Finally, after 5 or 6 pieces, I had music, and I turned it on and hooked it up to the intercom of the ship and started playing music, and I had a happy captain. And I think that kept me out of trouble a little bit right there. They were loading this Liberty ship, which had just come in from somewhere in the South Pacific, and they worked around 24 hours a day loading. I mean, it never stopped. They were putting that stuff on there faster than you could shake a stick at. And the only thing about the ship, it had a peculiar smell I didn't care for. And I finally asked one of the guys working on the cargo, I said, "What is that smell?" And he says, "We just came back from some island down in the South Pacific with copra, coconut, ground up coconut, and it ferments and gets down in the bottom of the ship, and hot diggity dog, man, there's a smell that'll knock your hat off." And so within, I swear, within just hours, we were underway, and we had, I think, three 20 millimeters on one side and three on the other, a 3-inch gun on the fantail. Not too much protection, but that was our job, is to get that cargo to wherever the guys were. Off we took. It's going due west, and went out under the Golden Gate, and our chief aboard, who was in charge of everything, said, "You smoke?" And I said, "Yeah, a little." And he said, "Well, if you want to quit, this is the time." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, when you go out under that Golden Gate and that groundswell gets you," he said, "every guy aboard here will feel it, and if you just decide to quit smoking right then, you won't smoke anymore." Well, I did, and I was off. I got away from smoking pretty good. We went due west and pulled into Honolulu, and docked for what reason I don't know. I don't know whether we left something off or took something on. Anyhow, from there we went on out southwest and wound up in I think they called them the nickel docks. They had exploded a couple days before we got there and pretty well destroyed everything. But we were supplying some of the troops at Guadalcanal. That was the island that we were trying to take back from the Japs. And so we dropped off our supplies there and went back to San Francisco and got another load and went back out. We hit most of those islands, the Admiralty groups. There's just hundreds and hundreds of islands in this area, and it was very interesting. The natives are different. They dress, doctor them, color themselves up different with lime and so forth, and do something to their hair. They look a little weird, but anyhow, it was interesting. And after I think 2 trips to the Southwest Pacific, we went from there. I think on about the 3rd time, we went from the Southwest Pacific and headed, why I don't know, due east out of an island just off of Australia. And as we were sailing along, now we got very limited firepower, nothing much more. I'm up on the bridge, and it's about, I don't know, evening. Sun hasn't set, and there's a ship on the horizon going almost a parallel course with us after a few hours in the ocean, and the captain is walking back and forth, and he said, "You have any idea who that is?" And I said, "No idea at all." I said, I can't identify those. It's some kind of a gunboat, but I couldn't tell you what." And he said, "Challenging." I said, "Sir?" He said, "Challenge you." I said, "Yes, sir." So I got on the blinker, sent a blinker message challenging that ship for a right answer. And I don't know what we were going to do if we got the wrong one. I don't know. I was running like hell. Anyway, we got the right answer. It was one of ours, and so I guess the captain could go to sleep that night. He thought that guy's going to be traveling along with us for a few hours and come over and eat us up. So we went about halfway across, and it's a great circle route. You drop south, you go way down to where you go so far down south, going east to come across. Uh, why I don't know. I guess we were headed for South America for some reason. It got cold. The weather changes. You're down in the cold area of the South Pole. We hit a storm. Had no name, no nothing. It just came from out of nowhere, and it tore us to pieces. It broke masts, tore off everything in the way of wires above the deck. It tore off 3 lifeboats, left us with 1, and that lifeboat was, as away would go, it was hanging from its end, dipping the bow of it into the water. We went by, and the captain said, "I want that boat saved," and we all turned to, and when the wave would lift it up, we'd try to tie it off and hold it, and they weren't doing too good tying it off, so smart me, the boat got lifted by the guys, and it started to go down, and it's loaded full of water, and I thought, oh my God, it's going to yank them all over. So I stepped forward real fast, got the line, wrapped it around an Iron David there, secured it, and the only thing about it was my left leg was part of the security. And the bosun walked up, and with the guy that had told me, the sailor guy that had told me when to quit smoking, said, "You never step in the bite of a line." I said, "Yes, sir, I know that." Well, they got me out of that, and my left knee was such that I couldn't walk for a few days, but we made it, and we were so beat up that we made it to Chile, South America, pulled into and anchored offshore, because there wasn't any real dock. You just anchored offshore and went ashore by boat, and I don't know what we were there for, but I never got any message to send out or receive, and we were anchored off Chanarel, Chile. The natives came out, which I don't know, we were a quarter of a mile offshore, I guess. Natives came out in small boats with things to sell and things to trade, and I guess it was a pretty good business. One little boat came up loaded with stalks of bananas, ripe bananas, and I had a carton of Old Gold cigarettes that I couldn't smoke or didn't smoke. They were old, and I had quit smoking. And so I held up the carton of cigarettes and pointed at the bananas, and the native shook his head up and down. So I went down the gangplank, took 2 of us to bring the stalk of bananas ashore on the boat, and we took it back to the gunner's mate and myself took it back to our compartment. We shared on the fantail, the very tail end of the ship, laid them up on one of the cots, and then I went on up the deck, and I was walking, and the gunner's mate said, "You better try those bananas." And I said, "Oh, I grew up in the South. I've had bananas." I said, "Why?" He said, "Try one of these bananas." And I went back and got one. And I have to say right here and now, this was my first tree-ripened banana, a South American banana. And my goodness, it was delicious. Sweet, soft, moist, just unlike anything I had ever eaten before. I made a good deal with my Old Golds. From here off of Chanarel, I still don't know what we were there for. We lifted anchor and started north along the coast and went from Chanarel, Chile, up to Quito, Ecuador. There's a big, beautiful river comes roaring out of the mountains, flowing out of the mountains, with palm trees and tropics and everything. And we pulled up into that river and anchored. And I don't know what we were there for. The only thing, I guess we were getting repaired by lots of pits and beasts. bits and pieces. And the biggest product we got here was balsa wood. My God, the deck was just stacked with it. The crew began making things. The one I liked was, it was about a 4 or 5 inch thick shoe, shaped like a shoe, and then we took some canvas straps we had taken off of something else and made it to cover our foot, and we were walking around, man, we were a foot taller and you couldn't even feel it. We enjoyed it. So from this off of Quito, Ecuador, we went back out into the Pacific, and again headed north and went to the canal and started through the canal, and in the middle of the canal, halfway across, I'll put it, is a lake. I've forgotten the name of it, a big, beautiful, tropical, smooth lake. And here they degalsed us. I had never heard of this either. And I said, what is this? And they said, we pass an electrical charge all through your ship, and it keeps you from attracting magnetic mines. The Germans have put magnetic mines in the Caribbean Sea, which most people had never heard of. Well, they still don't know it. And if you pass close enough, you attract it, and once it bumped you, you were gone. So the only thing about this was you had to remove everything, watches, anything that was even least the electrical, get it off the ship and away from it, or it was ruined. This went on for a few hours. Anyhow, overnight, we were finally degalsed and ready to go out the far side. We went through the rest of the canal into the Caribbean and anchored off of the canal. For some reason, I had been picked as the one that, a radioman, you know, nobody would bother with a radioman, to bring back whatever it was the crew wanted. And I had been picked to get a small bottle of rum, or any rum or alcohol I could get, and get it back to the board of the ship. We were going to have coffee and drink a little rum. And I put it in my left sock inside of my left ankle, so that it was between my left and my right, and it hardly bulged at all. It was very nice. And the Marines are most of the on guard duty. As I passed through it, this Marine said, "You stand still a minute," and I did. He walked, he said, "Spread your feet," and I did. And he took that club and hit that bottle, and then we both stood there and looked at each other while the rum trickled out of my shoe. And he said, "Have a good evening," and I went on, and that was the end of that. I don't know how he knew I had a bottle in that sock. Anyhow, onward. I don't know which officer was the navigator, but our ship was headed in a northerly direction for a number of hours, and in the pre-dawn and I was up on the bridge standing alongside the sailor on the wheel, and the captain was also on the deck. I saw this large, just a mountain forming, coming up out of the horizon. As the more visibility you could see, and the closer you got, tremendous rise of a mountain, and we're steering right toward it. And the captain made some comment about, I hope he's got it figured to get around Trinidad. We're trying to get to the Guantanamo Bay in the eastern tip of Cuba is where our destination was. And our navigator, I think, had used Trinidad as the steer toward that, and you'll eventually take a right, and you'll hit where we really wanted to go. Anyhow, it just formed there. It was a beautiful sight to see. We went on over to Guantanamo, and you have to set outside the anchorage area. There's nets pulled to keep the subs from getting in, and you sit there anchored waiting for the 2 or 3 nets to be removed. And as you sit there, sharks circle the ship, about 10 feet off the sides, 2 and 3 at a time, maybe 15 or 20 going around the ship. And I was on the bridge, and I was watching them go by. They were 8, 10 feet at least, and they sort of kind of, I thought, rolled and looked up and was looking at me, and I'm looking down at them, and I noticed that we left Guantanamo, went through the Windward Passage, and headed northeast, and was just barely offshore of Florida in the middle of the night. My home, Miami, was to my left, and I'm up on the bridge watching it go by, and I thought, my God, with all that light, we were on the water out beyond it in the darkness. We were a silhouette like you've never seen before, and I thought, oh my God, the subs must be sitting out there asking, which sub, you want that one or do I get that one? Anyhow, I thought, how do you ever get up this coast without getting killed? Anyhow, we went on and finally made it to New York and went into the harbor there in New York and anchored. And this was now February of 43, I think. I don't know, I lose track of time. It was very cold in New York in 1943. Yeah, I guess it was 43. Anyhow, February. And I went into my compartment, and on my bunk was, after looking at it, I decided this is foul weather gear. We had never been given any foul weather gear, so I took what was pants and jacket and hat and everything, the whole works, and I put it on, and the word came through, the radioman, signalman on bridge with the captain. We were getting ready to sail. My God, it was cold. In fact, the stack of the ship, believe it or not, I backed up to that and plastered my body to it because I could feel warmth come through the metal. Anyhow, they built us a little frame box for the wheelhouse so that you didn't have to stand out in the weather anymore. You were inside a box big enough for the guy doing the wheeling and the captain and myself and a couple of charts and so forth. Anyhow, we set sail, and just as we left the harbor getting into the Atlantic, a ship pulled up and to our gangplank, which was still dangling down, and 2 guys come up, each one with equipment, and bumped onto the deck, and one of them said, "Radioman," and I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Here's your equipment," and I said, "My equipment?" They said, "Bring this to the radioman, and you're the radioman. Thank you very much." So I took it to my compartment and opened it up, and there was instructions. This was an emergency radio system for distress only, and I'd never seen anything quite like it. Anyhow, I showed how to set it up, and I proceeded to 1, 2, 3, 4, went through all, set it up, tried to test it, couldn't get nothing. I said, I don't know what I'm doing with this. Anyhow, I'm dialing around later, and I hear a voice on it, and somebody's talking. I think, oh, there it is. So I used that measurement and went backwards from where I found the voice and set it up backwards, and then I opened up and called. There was supposedly 3 of these in the convoy, and one of them answered me and said, "Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear." I said, "Thank you very much." So I was on duty now, we had to divide our time so that there was always someone on the distress frequency. I don't know, there was a couple hundred ships in convoy. They're lined up in rows. Row 2 would start with 20, and the next should be 21, 22, 23, and I don't know how. There must be 10, 15 ships in the line, and it goes all the way across. We had a couple hundred ships in this convoy, and each ship was loaded, what it turned out to be, loaded with stuff for the Normandy invasion of France. And we set out, and as I tested my distress frequency with the Commodore's ship and a couple others, it turned out mine was working very well. In fact, working so well that when we got out a ways, a seagoing tug that was with us was falling behind, and they called and said, you have the equipment to contact him, tell him to get himself up in line and quit falling back there. And Doug answered, telling me that they had everything they could do. They had the motor tied down, they were running wide open, they were giving it everything they had. This is the best they can do. They wouldn't be able to keep up, so we just slowly pulled away from them and left them. And I thought to myself at the time, I thought, the Germans ain't going to waste a torpedo sinking a tugboat, so they ain't got nothing to worry about. So onward we went, and you do a big circle route in the middle of the Atlantic on your way to the British Isles. You are way north. You're getting up almost into the Arctic. When we came from the South Pacific over to South America and up to the canal to come through the Panama Canal, I was kind of didn't know really that this was going on, but halfway across the canal in the lake that's there is beautiful country, beautiful tropical jungle. They degaussed us. I may have told you this before. They put an electrical charge on this metal ship, and it keeps you from attracting floating mines, magnetic mines that the Germans had put in the Caribbean. A lot of people don't even know the Germans got over to the Caribbean, but they had mined the Caribbean. And we were going to go from, turned out to, we were going to go from the Panama Canal to New York. And so they degaussed us, and you have to take everything off the ship that's even vaguely affected by electric, or it's ruined. So they degaussed us, and we set sail from Panama Canal to the northeast direction. I don't know who the navigator was, but I wish you'd have seen what he did to Jamaica. We're sailing along, and it just twilight of morning, just barely enough light, and I'm up on the bridge. The captain's there, and he's saying, "What the hell's going on?" And here is this mountain. I mean, a big goddamn mountain coming up out of the water. This is Jamaica, it turns out to be, and we're going to go right smack dab in the middle of it. And he slows everything down and says, "We want to take a right and get out of here." So we went to port and took a hard right to go to Guantanamo Bay. And as I say, I may have told this before, but we pulled up to the nets of Guantanamo Bay, and we have to stay there until they open the nets and let us in from the German subs. And while you're waiting to go through, you're just sitting there doing nothing. I was looking on the bridge, looking over, and from those wings of the bridge, you're out over the water, really, the highest point of the ship. and you're looking down right into the water. And we were, I don't know, 30, 40 feet from the net waiting, and the sharks were going circling around our ship. I mean, the biggest sharks I have ever seen. And as they would go by a long ways, they would kind of roll so they could look up. And I'm looking right down, even though it's 20, 30 feet down, I'm looking right into the eye of them, just like, just fall over, just come on and fall over. Man, what sharks those are. Anyhow, they opened the nets and we got in there and anchored. And then a day or two later, we opened the nets and got out of there and set sail for New York at night, as usual. And maybe, as I say, I've told this possibly before, but as we sailed by Florida, went right by South Florida, Miami, right. I looked over at the lights and thought, I live there. That's my house right over there. I thought, oh my God, we must make the biggest silhouette against that background that you've ever seen. Man, they couldn't miss. But I kept thinking, we're empty, actually. They could tell by the amount of water, how high we were setting up out of the water, that we didn't have any cargo. We were just a damn ship. Probably wasn't worth a torpedo, and let us go on through. Anyhow, we wound up in New York another day or two later and pulled into New York Harbor and anchored. It turned out that they were making up a convoy to go across the North Atlantic with everything that they needed to invade Normandy and defeat the Germans. I was on the bridge in 1943, February, and the ship came up and brought our foul weather gear, and they deposited it to each quarters, put my foul weather gear on my cot. I went back and looked at it, and then it was time to leave New York, and I was rushed up to the bridge to stand by with the captain or anything he might want, signals or send signals or anything. And the word come up, okay, Luck, they're looking for you. Where's your foul weather gear? And I said, I got it on. And then they said, Jesus, that's a week's worth. You don't put it all on at one time. So I had my foul weather gear on, and the Liberty ship has a stack that comes up through the center. And so help me God, that stack can get warm when you're really fired up and under sail, under power. And I was plastered up against that, all my foul weather gear. We hadn't even got out of New York Harbor, and I was already suffering from the cold. And off we go to the North Atlantic. And as we were leaving the North Atlantic, a ship pulls up and deposited 2 or 3 containers. Give this to the radio man. And I said, I am the radio man. They said, here's your gear. I said, what gear? They said, it explained in the boxes. Take it. And I took it, went to the Radio Shack and began reading it. It was some sort of rare foul weather gear that they wanted me to know about, and I was to set it up and man one of the foul weather emergency networks or stations on the convoy. There must have been a couple hundred ships in this convoy. And I set it up as we were sailing, and I couldn't get anything to work. And I kept dialing around, and pretty soon I heard there were supposedly 3 of us in this convoy of a couple hundred. And I heard one of the others talking to one of the others, and I thought, well, he got through. So I looked at the figures that he was giving me, and then I went backwards from that to set mine up. Instead of from the bottom, I went from the top back down to the bottom and had a set, checked over with him, got loud and clear reception, and said, you're on, and that was it. And we set sail and set sail. Ain't no goddamn sail. We went under power and started going. You go in a line, like we might be ship 33 behind 34 and on however many hundreds there were. There was 3 of us to man the 500 kilocycle distress frequency. Anything that happened that was distressful, we were to hear it. And about halfway across the North Atlantic, 1943, so cold you couldn't believe it. In fact, one gunner's mate said, if you go overside, you know how long you last? And I said, no, how long do you last? Well, 3 or 4 minutes. And I said, well, I'm going to be on one of those rafts that's tied to the mast that when you sink, that raft floats, and I'm going to be on it. He said, oh, well, you last 6 or 7 minutes because the water splashes over and freezes you to it. I said, thanks a lot. I'll remember that. So then we set sail. You never take your clothes off. You go to bed with them. You almost take showers in them, in fact. They're so attached to them. And you get about halfway across, and in about what would be 2 a.m. to you landlubbers, I'm on distress frequency work, and call comes over. This is ship 22. This is by code, you know. And it says we're ship 22, and we've just struck ship 21, and we're taking water. And that was it. So I type it up, take it up to the bridge, hand it to the guy on duty, and said, make sure the captain gets this right away. We got a couple ships in trouble. And as I say, that was about 2 a.m. As I say, I may have told this story before. Anyhow, I think I got back to my quarters about 4 on the fantail, the very ass end of the ship. And I don't think I'd even got to sleep. And gunner's mate said, Luck, you better wake up. Yeah, better wake up, but what? He said, take a look. And there's a big porthole in the front of our quarters where we can look forward to the bridge 50, 60 feet away that rises up higher than ours. And there is ships tied up to both sides of us, British sub-chasers, all kinds of war ships. And I said, so? He said, they're looking for you. I said, oh my God, what the hell have I done? So I rushed up there, and one of them with what we classified scrambled eggs on his hat said, you the radio man? I said, yes. He said, where's your Radio Shack? And I said, right here. And I took him down there, and he said, you received this message? I said, yes, sir, that's my message. He said, do you type it as you receive it? I said, no. He said, where's the copy you take when you heard it? And I said, looked at the waste paper basket, but before I could tell him it was in there, he had another subordinate dump it, and they were all over the floor, and I kept teasing, I sure hope there ain't nothing embarrassing in there. And they grabbed it up and showed it to the guy and said, here it is, and off they went. And they went down the passageway toward the bridge, I guess, and I said, what the hell is going on? He said, out of the all distress stations, you're the only one that heard anything. I said, so? He said, well, ship 22 and ship 21 ain't out there. I said, what do you mean they ain't out there? And they said, we've been looking for them for hours, way back, anything. They ain't out there. I said, well, that's where it goes. But what I hate is I couldn't write any mother or daughter or wife and say, your son, your husband, your daddy went down at latitude and longitude, but I don't know what happened to him either, and you never know, and on you go. We pulled into something Firth or Forth or something that had these protected bays are called something in Scotland. Anyhow, we pulled into an anchorage in Scotland, and I go in aboard the ship inward from the outside of the ship, and the ship is blacked out. No light can escape from the ship at night. You don't show any light anytime, anywhere, and you go inside and you do whatever you're going to do, read or smoke or do something anyhow, and then you know, well, I go on duty in about 30 minutes, which is about midnight, landlubber's time, and you pick up your books and everything, and you go to these doors that are bolted and shut tight, and you open 3 or 4 of the latches, and you make sure no lights are showing, and you step out of blackness into not blackness. It's in northern Scotland, and it's still daylight, more daylight than you had inside the ship. And you think, what the world is going on? Where are we? Anyhow, going around Scotland, I got to see the northern lights. I got to see that the sun hardly ever goes down. We got around on the eastern side of Scotland and pulled into a protected area. And then this is in preparation for going down the English Channel. You go down the English Channel in rows, usually a couple rows, not too far apart, and you go and stop, go and stop. They jiggle on the not keeping the same speed and everything, throws the Germans off when they were launching torpedoes out trying to sink us. Just, like shooting fish in a barrel. Anyhow, we were in this protected harbor waiting to get in line, and boat, oh, I don't know, 40, 50 feet long with a nice engine in it, and two guys aboard it, put, 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 going by. Then they waved, and I waved my arm and said, yeah, thank you, or something. And so I turned to the gunner's mate and I said, what the hell language was that? He said, that was Scotch. I said, that's Scotch? He said, yeah, that's Scotch. I had never heard Scotch spoken. I don't know, it sounds like Chinese or something. Bright moonlit night tonight, you know. I had never heard it before. It was quite a... So then the following morning we go out of the protection and get in line, and you have a barrage balloon over you. Every so often, our ship had one, some of the others didn't. That stops the German dive bombers, supposedly. And you go and stop and go and stop. And you have to have a guy in the bow to make sure to tell you not to run over the guy in front of you. Anyhow, that throws them off. I don't think we report had any ships torpedoed or sunk in that transition, that going down the Thames, going down the English Channel. And when we got to the Thames River, we took a hard right to the west and went down the Thames and pulled into dockage, and there's where I saw my first bomb damage in the dock, where it blew a big hole in it and so forth. And I was staring down in that hole, and behind me I hear this roar, and it's a Rolls-Royce English engine in a Spitfire coming up the Thames River from the German side toward the English side, roaring by about, I swear, not more than 10, 15 feet above the Thames River. What a thrill. Never seen anything like it. Now, on Liberty in London, this is where we had just docked. I'm out, and I like London. I'm dating a local girl and enjoying her, enjoying the company. And guy's mate said, how come you aren't turning in to get duty here? I said, what's this mean? He said, they're looking for volunteers. And I said, what for? And he said, to stay in London for a while. I said, well, So I hurried back to the boat, and the other radio signalman that occasionally filled in for me said, I beat you to it. He was already there. I said, okay, that's the way it goes. So later on, after we had left London and sailed across the North Atlantic to New York, and I was back in San Francisco on Treasure Island, this is some weeks later, and the Normandy has been invaded, and they're fighting, trying to get inland on France, and I'm back ready to go across the Pacific again. I look up on Treasure Island, and coming down, I look up, and here's the signalman, the radioman that filled in part-time, and he's coming toward me, but he's limping a little, and bent over a little, and, you know, kind of beat up. I said, what the hell happened to you? And he said, well, I'll tell you what, you know that thing I volunteered for and beat you out on? I said, no, I don't, but I hated it, darn it. He said, well, let me tell you about it. He said, they took an old Pan American freighter, rusty, rat-vested, dirty junkyard boat, and mounted guns all over it, and we went up ashore and shoved into the beach. Everybody raced up to mount the guns, which we had been trained to fire, and we were going to give them hell while the landing craft came up around us and went on to the beach. And he said, we docked and jerked to a stop, and I got to the gun, and he said something went off above us. And he said, as far as I know, hit every goddamn human being above deck. And I said, hit? What do you mean? He said, shrapnel. Pieces of everything. He said, and I said, Lieutenant, yeah, he got it. He got it. Everybody I named, he said he got it. And I said, is that what you got? And he said, yeah, I got it. So I said, well, Jesus, that's too bad, you know. Woo-wee. So that, we didn't last too long. But what amazes me, I've never seen this in the landings of the coverage of the invasion of Normandy. Any big boat going ashore, a big boat, I mean big cargo boat going ashore, as this was said to me, with the boats hovering around. I've never seen it, and yet I wouldn't doubt him. I sure lost a lot of people I knew, and that's the way it goes. One more. My mother had sent me homemade cookies, home-baked cookies. She was a good cookie maker, and sent me a box of cookies. And I think it had followed me from Ohio to California, California to Southwest Pacific, Southwest Pacific, South America, South America, Panama Canal, Panama Canal, New York, and New York to London. And by the time I got it, I wish I could tell you, the box looked a little beat up. It felt funny, and you opened it up, and it was cookie dust. Dust. There wasn't a solid piece of there you could have chewed on. It was dust. And I don't really think I ever did anything other than tell Mom thanks for the cookies. One more item. Mail call was quite an eventful thing, and this one mail call, I don't think I got too much mail, but I did get a letter that was pretty well beat up and tattered and so forth. They delivered whatever they had, and I did read a little bit of it, and I felt she, very nice lady, girl was writing him, so I folded it up and put it in my next letter and put a cover that I'm sorry that it got to me by accident, and I read some of it, and I would like to say I'm sorry, and hope everything turns out well. And I gave her my address, and she wrote me back. We exchanged letters for, I don't know, weeks, months, I guess, over the time of the war. She was from, I think, Waukegan, Illinois. I can't even remember the name now, but one of the letters down the line, she wrote me that he had been lost. Lost in action. And that's about all it ever amounted to. We just slowly got farther apart, and less letters, and I don't know who she was or how she turned out or anything else, but it was interesting. It was nice to receive letters, and she was very nice writing. I think she was about my age, and our interest was about the same, and it just somebody you pass along the way. One of the other items, at sea going around the world, time, you going like from Frisco to Australia, you go across the date line, you lose a day going one way and you gain a day coming across the other way. I often wonder what happened with you if it was your birthday and you didn't have it. Anyhow, the time it was for the entire world was set in London, and the entire world and all the armies and navies and everything worked off of one master time, and that time came over the radio, and that was my job to pick it up at a precise hour, and then as it beep, 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 you set everything that is required to that time that is in London, and that was how, I don't know whether anybody knew it, but everything worked off of that one time signal from London. And when I would be required to receive it, I made it my job to put it on all speakers, all forms of communication, all aboard the ship, to the captain, navigator, everybody, so that they were setting their times the same as I was setting mine. And my biggest job was not only that, but the code books that I worked from were about 18 inches wide, about 2 foot long, and the porthole in the Radio Shack was big enough so that I could throw them over the side. They were lead, and you had if there was any danger of you sinking and the Japs catching you or anything, you got rid of the code books, you threw them over the side. I didn't know. I just thought I'd mention that in case nobody had ever told you. I did notice that porthole, extra big, well, extra big still wasn't big. I was the only one aboard ship that could pass through a normal-sized porthole. I found that out after I was out in the middle of the Pacific, and the lieutenant had locked his keys up, and for somehow somebody said, I think Fluck's small enough, he probably can go through a porthole. So help me God, they come and got me and said, we want you to try to go through a porthole up here. So they hung me over the side of the ship, and I went through the porthole, opened the door. So now anytime anybody got locked up, locked out or something, they called me. But this porthole in the radio shack was made big enough for that code book to go through with its lead loading, something or other. And I knew I could go through it because I could go through any porthole on the ship. And as the war progressed, we'd go back to the United States. Second or third trip back, they came out and cut larger portholes. They found that as the ship was going down, a number of sailors were being trapped in their quarters, and waterproof doors and portholes, but when you opened the portholes, it wasn't any good, you couldn't pass through them. So they made one porthole in every ship's quarters, big enough for, well, I don't know how big it was, but pretty much anybody that we had aboard our ship. There wasn't too many fat people out there. And boy, I really wish I knew what time it was and everything. Like, I think it's 1943. I'm still anchored in Ulithi, the lagoon in the Southwest Pacific, where we're got a load of material, Army, Marine equipment to be unloaded and be used. And I, being a radio signalman, I had some liberties that some of the others didn't get, and I made a hammock and swung it out on the open deck underneath a big metal deck above me that held the 3-inch gun, the fantail. Now, I enjoyed sleeping in a hammock. It was very nice. Anyhow, I'm in it asleep, and it's just barely daylight, or it turned out to be just barely daylight, and my friend Tripoli, the one that saves me and pulls me up out of the water and does other things, was on guard duty, and whether it was regulation or not, but he carried like a billy club around his wrist, strapped around his wrist, and swung it, banged on things when he wanted some attention. Anyhow, I'm asleep, and he comes up to me and whops the bottom area of the hammock where my butt is, whop, whop a couple of times. I'm like, Jesus, God, what are you trying to do? Kill me? He said, take a look. And I looked to the port side that he was pointing at, and what looked like maybe a tanker was at anchor there, and it was on fire. And I ran over to the deck, and I said, what happened? He said, I don't know. I just noticed that there's a puff, and there's the flame. And I said, my God, the cook sure goofed up with the cook stove. I couldn't figure out what else could have happened. And just then there was kind of a let in the fire. You could see the deck for a minute. And I saw, I don't know, 20, 30 guys running down the deck before it just ended. It blew up. And there was nothing we could do. There wasn't that much of anything anybody could do. You're in a guarded lagoon, and we have no boats we can put over. The Navy at the far end sent some boats down to pick up whatever they could, and we pretty well marked it off as somebody was careless, was smoking when he shouldn't have been. We found out days later that it turned out that the little Jap sub had got in and blew up the first thing it passed. So they did some more closing up of the nets to play it a little safer. And I'm still in Ulithi. I spent quite a bit of my life in Ulithi Lagoon. It's a little spit of land at the top of a volcano from hundreds of years ago. And we're anchored there waiting to get unloaded. And the word comes out that the fleet's coming in tomorrow morning. We would like to greet them and make them welcome. Put something white on and wave something white as they come through and let them know we're with them. I really wasn't looking forward to waving at a sailor. This just did kind of set well with me. And I said, "What is this?" And they said, "Well, they just had a battle, classified the Battle of the Philippines with the Japs, and they're coming back to anchor and regroup." And I said, "Okay, I'll be there." And quite early, daylight, you could see it. So I again was off duty, and I was down on the deck, and here they came. They looked like almost side by side, as some of the ships were, but anyhow, there must have been 15 or 20 of them coming in, and I've never, they opened up the netting for them, and I'm having some trouble telling this, reliving it. The reason they looked like they were side by side is because some were towing the others, and I waved. Not an old-time sailor, but I'd never seen anything that looked like that. There wasn't a whole ship in the whole bunch. Never seen anything like it. Some were leaning, some were way off balance, some the bow was down, some the fantail was down, some superstructure had been tore away. There wasn't a whole ship there. And here they come. We had heard that this group had put out the word they had beat the Japs in the battle. And as I watched them go by, I thought, boy, if we're the winners, I've never seen anything like it. I would have swore we lost the war. In fact, I don't know how some of them got back. They were shot full of holes. There wasn't as I say, it wasn't a whole ship in the whole bunch. None of them looked like ships. They just looked like pieces of junk coming in. But we found out later that they had won the Battle of the Philippines. It takes me days sometimes to record. I have trouble with reliving it. Other than Ulithi, we went into the Admiralty group down off of Australia quite a bit, and as I say, it takes days to record this. I sometimes get lost where I am. I remember the Admiralty group, we pulled into an anchorage, and the civilian, we were with stevedores, in other words, civilian, on board this ship too. And every time we went into a different war zone, why, they'd be having chow in the same area we were, and they'd be talking about how much their pay just got increased because they went into this zone. We always got a kick out of that. Anyhow, they had built a little inboard boat. They were very clever with equipment and anything they could find. They made this little boat, and but was letting us use it. And we were anchored at this one group in the Admiralty, and here again it was like a ring of a volcano with safe anchorage within it. And then the islands were rather narrow and covered with palm trees. And we had been at this one anchorage, and our ship wasn't too far off from one of these little islands. And I asked the lieutenant, I said, we're going to use the little boat that the guys built and go over to that island. It's supposedly secure with just the guys off duty. Do you have any objection? He said, no, just be careful and get back within time to go on duty. And I said, okay. So I think maybe 6 or 7 of us, maybe about 6, got in this little boat, and it had inboard motor, put along like that. And we went over and pulled up to this island, and I don't know why, I seem to be the instigator of some of this stuff. Anyhow, I jumped over and into about some deep water between ankle and knees, and walked ashore and took the anchor and threw it. And as I did, I looked up, and here stood, I don't know, 6, 7 native kids, all ages, little tiny guys, mumbling and doing something in the way of talking, and just standing there. And so we gave them some candy and so forth, and took off through the island. And I was in the lead going across this island, and I come up over a little rise and went down, started to go down, and I could see a little creek running right ahead of us, and a little, probably the thing coming out of the island itself, not from the seawater. And as I approached, there was fish about 4, 6, 8 feet long on the bank, and they just literally wiggled right down and went back into the water. It was more like walking. And I told the guys, my God, I just saw some fish walk across that water and walk across that land, go down into the water. Here again they thought, luck's been at it again, Anyhow, nobody's seen it but me, but it was. Later on, they were even shipping those into South Florida after the war. The darn things would walk across enough land to go from one puddle to another puddle. Anyhow, it was very interesting, and we walked around, and these native kids were following us, and I kept thinking, boy, this must be like Columbus. These are the natives, and they've never seen white men before, and here we are. And we try to talk to them, and if nothing would work, but they just walked around, and we gave them whatever we could. And time to go, we went back to the ship, and our guys got aboard, and I walked out and brought the anchor and put it over, and the native kids came down to the edge of the water, and as we were pulling away to get enough distance so we could start our engine, the native kids start a chant. And one of the gunner's mates said, God, isn't that amazing? And I said, you know what that is? And the guy that says I was crazy because I saw walking fish said, okay, Luck, what is it? And I said, you know what that is? That's show me the way to go home. I'm tired and I want to go to bed. And they all looked at me like, oh, Christ. Luck done destroyed Columbus here. Well, one more tale about this wooden boat. God, it must have been, 15, 16 feet long. But try to take 6 or 8 guys in it that we were using. I'll tell one more story about it. We were anchored in the Admiralty group, which is off of Guantanamo. Guantanamo, is that right? Anyhow, off of Australia, and uh, we I had we all had liberty. We were off duty, and uh, we could go off the boat as long as we got back when our duty started. So I signaled a big Navy ship, probably a cruiser, that wasn't too far away, but it was off our bow, different from toward the island where we went. And I signaled, and I said, could we send over a movie crew tonight to watch one of your movies? And they said, yeah, come on over. So the 6 of us loaded into the boat and put over. You should have seen those Navy guys on that cruiser looking down at us as we come up in a wooden boat with an inboard motor, looking like a bunch of junkies from Honolulu or something. Anyhow, we got up there and we were watching the movie, and the Japs, well, supposedly the Japs came. Anyhow, the alarms went off that we were under attack, and we run down to our boat, got in our boat, put on toward ours, and the guy in charge of the island safety put out a fog cloud, and it is so thick that it would just obscure the entire island. You couldn't tell what was on it or anything about it. It was blinding. I mean, it was something I'd never seen it done before. And we're putting along. I can't see nothing but just about 3 feet from the ship into this cloud. And as far as I know, we're headed for our boat. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, something's wrong here. Something's wrong. And I look down, and the water, it's putting, but the water ain't going by. And I said, okay, gang, we ain't moving. And I'm always the one that was told them the good news, you know. And it seems that we lost the screw, and the engine was running, but we wasn't getting anywhere. So I think we had one pair of small oars. So somebody said, well, we'll row. But what was funny, we had no idea which way to row. We were in a cloud, I mean, could see nothing but about 4 or 5 feet just around us. So we paddled around, hollered, and did a little bit of everything, and pretty soon it began to lift. It doesn't stay permanently, it blows away. And I looked up, I said, there's the ship right over there. So boy, we paddled and headed for it, and as we pulled up to the gangplank, I don't know how long it has expired, but I never heard the first bomb or shot or anything. I think the Japs just came close enough to set us off. Anyhow, we pulled up the gangplank, and I've never seen so many bright lights come on all my life. Every light was aimed down at the bottom of the gangplank, and there we were, the officers standing at the top of the gangplank. And I thought, oh, we're going to be shot in the morning. And he said, where in the hell have you been? And I said, well, I could now see the ship. And I said, we were over there watching a movie. We had liberty, and I called over, got an okay, and we were watching a movie, and we tried to get back, but we lost the screw. We've had to paddle half the distance. So he said, okay, tell you what, I'll get to you in the morning and let you know what you're going to get. Well, just to make the misery a little longer, I'm going to end it here and say he never said the first thing about that ever again. We hadn't actually missed any true attack and didn't miss any firing any guns or anything. So, but I still wondered what the devil he might do to us. And he never brought it up again, and that was the end of that. We got the screw fixed on the boat, and that was the end of that. And when we were off duty, we used this little boat quite often, and there was little inlets or like little openings of the island between the all out, nothing but ocean on one side, and the lagoon on the other. And thank you. And we would go back and forth through those, investigating shells and fish and so forth, having a great old time. And as usual, I was directing traffic, and we went through this little opening, come around a couple of mangroves trees, and I screamed out, "Stop, turn, back up, mine." What? What are you saying? Mine. And I said, "It's a goddamn mine." And they all looked up, and here was one of those mines that I don't know whether they anchor them or whether they float or what. Anyhow, it's a big, round, black, terrible-looking thing with things sticking out on it about the size of your thumb. It stick out 4 or 5 inches, and when you bump one of those, you are gone. And we came within about 6 feet of it, and man, were we scrambling to get out of there. When we got back to the ship, we reported it, in case the tide picked it up and moved it somewhere. We didn't want it to blow up a ship. But I never will forget that guy. He said, "A what?" I said, "A mine." "A what?" And I thought, if I had to repeat it 2 or 3 more times, we ain't going to be here. This island off of Guantanamo was Florida. That was the name of it, Florida Island. And the British had really secured it, set some headquarters up on this island, and all the movement of anything moving, trucks or otherwise, was on the wrong side of the road all the time. They had put their method into it. Anyhow, at night, some nights, we could watch a movie, and it was outside, and if the Japs attacked, they just turned out all the lights and run like hell. And they had coconut palm trunks laid down, and you sat on those and watched the screen. And we could occasionally get a beer and a cigar and some peanuts. And we would be sitting on those trunks of those trees watching a movie. And we had you take a mouthful of peanuts and you chew them up pretty good, and then you take a big puff of cigar smoke and you roll that smoke around on them, kind of toast them, and then you take a big drink of beer and wash it all down. Man, we were living. Anyhow, you'd be sitting there, and the guard duty, the Marine as usual, come up and whop you one. If you didn't have your collar turned up, and your hat pulled down, your sleeves long, there was mosquitoes, and they were in charge of keeping you from being eaten alive and spreading disease. And the Marine, I usually wound up with this Marine, and I had this cigar peanuts routine, and we enjoyed movies and each other's company. And one more about this. Years later, I'm at work in Miami, and I'm behind a counter issuing building permits and making inspections outside, and this guy comes up to the counter and got a set of plans. He said, "I'd like to build this. What do I do?" And I was telling him about it, and I looked at him. I said, "You look familiar. Well, do we know each other?" And he said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, what we seeing? Were you in World War II?" "Yeah, I was a Marine." "A Marine?" "Oh, well, I was in the Navy." So then he come in to pick up the permit some weeks later, and I said, "Damn, I wish I knew who you were. You look familiar." And so then I inspected his footing, I inspected his slab floor. He put up his walls. Now this weeks are going by now, and scaffolding inside his walls that you walk on. They set blocks and set everything. They put the forms up to pour the tie beam around the top, and I make that tie beam inspection also. It has to be the width of the blocks 8 inches by 12 inches long. Of course, the block 16, but they're longer than that anyhow. 8 inches deep, and they have 4 pieces of 5/8 rod in it, spaced 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom, with enough room to let the concrete go around them. And I inspect that, okay it, and then they can pour it. And I was walking around looking down at the steel, and I said, "What do you do in the Marines?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know." I said, "Where were you?" He said, "Oh, I spent some time over near Guantanamo." And I said, "You spent some time on Florida Island?" He said, "Yeah." It was strange. Right there, we both knew that's where it was. He was the Marine that chewed the peanuts and smoked the cigars side by side there night after night watching those movies. And it took us all that time, months, to ever put where we were and what we were doing together and realize that's how we knew each other. Small world after all. I may have told this before, but Florida Island off of Guantanamo. Guantanamo had been a, boy, I mean terrible. Them chaps held out for everything, and it was quite a while getting it secure. And it finally got to the point where I said, can we ever go over there and take a look? And we got permission, and the Marines met us at the shore and said, yeah, don't go too far inland. If you want to look around, help yourself. So as I walked up the beach, the coconut palms, they weren't palms, they were just 10, 12 foot high stumps. The firepower had just destroyed everything above that was on them, and they were just, nothing had survived up there. You know what I mean? There had no plants. They just shot all the leaves and limbs and everything else off. And as I was walking along, I heard this strange noise. And I thought, what in the world is that? And I looked up, and on top of these coconut palms, and almost every one of them, was, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 lovebirds, all different colors and sizes, just chattering and having the best time you've ever seen. Most beautiful sight I think I've ever seen. And I looked at them and I thought, how in the hell did you guys make it? We quite often was in the same anchorage as the hospital ship Hope. We were dropping supplies off to kill people, and they were picking up people to try to save that had been shot or something. Anyhow, in off of, I believe it was off of Guantanamo, the hospital ship was anchored out very close to the open water. And there was a number of smaller fighting ships within that area to the island, destroyers and big fighting boats. And we were one of them anchored out there waiting for our cargo to be picked up. And the Marines went out and brought back a number of nurses from the ship over to the island to probably have a few beers and walk around, have a good time. And we heard that they had went over there. We didn't get to see them, but every ship that has a big gun, like a 3-inch gun on aboard, is fired and aimed by a telescope, a sighting thing that you put your eye up to, and then you can crank up, down, back and forth, and keep that gun aimed at exactly what you want to shoot. And when you're off duty, why, there's nothing wrong with climbing up on it and cranking around, looking and so forth, and make sure everything keeps working. And I was near I was on the fantail off duty, and I heard somebody say, the nurses are leaving the island, and they were going to come right by our ship to go to their hospital ship. Well, I say right by, well, within a quarter of a mile anyhow. So I ran and got to the 3-inch gun on the fantail, and another guy was helping me too, and we aimed our gun at the nurses that were aboard the smaller boats coming from the island, so that we could get them in. Hadn't seen a woman for so long. And I got there and got the gun, and it was my treat. And so I'm cranking away, keeping on them as they went by. And man, it was something. As I say, when they got to a position to where I couldn't see them anymore, I climbed off of the 3-inch gun seat and turned where all the other big ships were sitting out there, and every ship on every gun on every ship, I'll get it in a minute, was doing the same thing I was doing, and they were aimed at that nurse's boat, looking at those nurses, and I thought, oh my God, will you look at that? I don't know, there must have been 20 ships there. Every gun on them was aimed at those nurses, and I thought, holy mackerel, how'd you like to be sitting looking at the barrel? Just, God, I hope nobody slips or anything, you know. But that's, but everybody got a good look at a woman. And speaking of women, I was writing some stories, being in the Radio Shack by myself for hours and with a typewriter. I started typing some short stories, and when I finished them, I would pass. One of the gunner's mates saw it and read it and was passing it around. And pretty soon I had a number of stories floating around on the ship. And one guy said, Luck, you ain't got no sex in them. You got to get some sex in those things. And I said, well, I'm working on that. I'll try. You don't have a whole lot of time to work up a good sex story. So I became, then I'm looking for something to do with sex to put in my stories. And the guys, one trip we turned from the Admiralty Group, was headed back for Frisco, and as we're getting close by, they're talking about their wives and their girlfriends and everything, and what they're all going to do on their leave, and going to have lots of sex. And that question kind of came up, you know, boy, lots of sex. And I said, well, I went to the married men and I said, when you're normally married and so forth and happy, and so, how often do you have sex? And I wrote that down. I took a estimate of sex from every married man and some of the guys that were dating when they were had their own time, how often they had sex, and I sat down and I wrote, instead of a story, I just wrote that I have done a survey, and we're headed for the San Francisco, and we will be there X amount of days, and I have done a survey, and I know how often you could have sex to catch up. In other words, in order to catch up, I'm going to tell you how often you have to have sex. And there was a whole group in the galley, and I hadn't told them. They said, "Okay, Luck, what's the answer here? What are we doing?" And I said, "Well, you ready for this?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "You have to do it every 15 minutes." And I truthfully believe